Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'll be talking about Wisconsin's strangest UFO encounter of the third kind, which is when you make contact with a non-human intelligence. But first, I'll be starting out talking about how UFOs, UAPs have become so mainstream in the country of Poland that Poland's official mint has issued a UFO coin that levitates. And I'll be showing a video of that later on. Stay with us. It's going to be a great podcast. So Poland's official mint, the Manica Polska, has issued a coin shaped like a UFO that levitates. The coin reportedly contains a motor that makes it spin while the levitation is made possible by a magnetic field generated by the coin's base below. And if that isn't enough, the coin glows in the dark. And I'm going to show that video in just a moment. While the coin named the UFO MP-1766 is minted in Poland, it actually is not Polish currency. They say, and I quote, "We cannot simply create a coin that goes into official circulation because only central banks have the right to issue money." The mint's Lukasz Karda told the Getza Wyborska news outlet. He goes on to say, "Therefore, there is a business model of getting in touch with somewhat exotic foreign banks, in this case, the Bank of Cameroon." So it's coming from the Bank of Cameroon. According to notes from Poland, the coin's denomination is 1,766 Cameroon francs, or in US money, a mere $2.92. But Carta goes on to say, quote, "Its real value is significantly higher than its nominal one." That's what the mint says anyway. So here's the video that they put out. I thought that was fun to watch, and it also highlights the fact that UFOs, UAPs have become so mainstream that one country went so far as to mint a coin in the shape of a UFO. That was that coin's name is the UFO MP-1766, and it's minted in Poland, but it's actually not Polish currency. It's actually Cameroonian francs. I'd like to move on now and talk about Wisconsin's strangest close encounter of the third kind. Okay, so I'll be reading from ufoevidence.org. The title of the article is "Eagle River Close Encounter, Man Given Pancakes by UFO Occupants." And this article is by J. Rath. Okay, so on April the 18th, 1961, at Eagle River, Wisconsin, United States, Mr. Simmon, a chicken farmer in Eagle River, Wisconsin, saw a disc-shaped craft vertically on his farm. A hatch opened, and when he approached, he saw three human-looking men inside. They asked him for some water. They appeared to be cooking pancakes on a griddle, believe it or not. And in exchange for the water, they gave him 4 of the pancakes from the griddle. The episode survived rigorous assessment by the U.S. Air Force and is carried in the files as unexplained. And I guess this is a sketch of the UFO based on a drawing supplied by Joe Simmon. It's a usual oval-shaped disc, pipes around the center, coming through a depression ring, which acts as a belt around the entire craft. The height is reported to be about 12 feet, according to this diagram, and the width about 30 feet. And this is a picture of Joe Simmon himself. These are 2 photographs. And in the one on the right, he's holding the actual pancake. It's very flat and dry looking, and it's porous. It has some holes in it. Here's a graphic of what the craft looked like with the hatch open and an alien. It's an artist's rendering of the craft. And there's another one below of the artist's impression of the Eagle River encounter, where the alien is handing a picture to Joe Simmon. Actually, here it looks more like a silver trophy than a picture, but be that as it may. Okay, so the author of this article is Jay Rath, and the article reads, Wisconsin's strangest close encounter of the third kind must surely be the incident during which Joe Simmon was given 3 pancakes by, quote, Italian-looking aliens, end quote. A close encounter of the third kind is an actual meeting between humans and extraterrestrials, and Simmons is easily the state's best known. Despite the unlikely manner in which the story unfolded, the episode survived a rigorous assessment by the U.S. Air Force and is carried in their files as unexplained. So this was never debunked, folks. In 1961, Joe Simmon was a plumber, an auctioneer, and a part-time Santa Claus annually for the Eagle River Chamber of Commerce. He reported his age as 55 or 60, depending on the interview. At 11 a.m., April the 18th, Simmon was having a late breakfast when he heard a sound like that of a jet being throttled back, something like the sound of quote, knobby tires on wet pavement. I've never heard a description of a UFO sounding that way. Knobby tires on wet pavement. He went into the yard and saw a flying saucer drop out of the sky and hover over his farm. It was silver and, quote, brighter than chrome, end quote, 12 feet in height and 30 feet in diameter. On one edge were what appeared to be exhaust pipes 6 to 7 inches in diameter. And here's that sketch again. 12 feet high, 30 feet in diameter. It's got that depression ring around it with pipes protruding out of the depression ring. The disc landed and a hatch opened. Inside were 3 dark-skinned aliens. Okay, and I guess he's describing them as Italian-looking because they were dark-skinned. Each about 5 feet tall and weighing about 125 pounds. So not too big, and about average-sized, but small according to today's standards. They appeared to be between 25 and 30 years old and were dressed in dark blue or black knit uniforms with turtleneck tops and helmet-like caps. They were clean-shaven, Simmons said, and quote-unquote Italian-looking. Not sure how PR that is these days, but this is what the article says. Okay, so the aliens did not speak in his presence, but they had a silvery jug with two handles, heavier than aluminum, but lighter than steel, about a foot high. It seemed to be made of the same material as the craft. Simonton said it was a beautiful thing, a thermo jug-like bottle, quite unlike any jug I have ever seen here on Earth. And that's a direct quote. Through ESP or something, Simonton got the idea that the aliens wanted water. I guess they must have pantomimed water for the jug that they were handing him. He left the visitors, filled the jug from the water pump in his basement, then returned to the craft and gave the jug back. To do this, he had to brace himself against the UFO's hull and stretch up. Okay, so he actually made physical contact with their craft. From the subsequent Air Force report, quote, looking into the saucer, he saw a man cooking on some kind of flameless cooking appliance, end quote. The alien was preparing pancakes. Okay, that's kind of bizarre. First of all, this is an encounter of the third kind. That's unusual as it is. But now the occupants of the craft are cooking pancakes inside the craft. I don't think that's ever been reported before, folks. Okay, so the interior of the UFO was a dull black. Even the three, quote, extremely beautiful, end quote, instrument panels and had the appearance of wrought iron. Okay, that's never been reported before, wrought iron associated with a UAP craft. The contrast between the dark interior and shiny exterior so fascinated Simonton that he later said that he would, quote, would love to have a room painted in the same way, end quote. That's kind of funny. Okay, so in return for the water, one of the aliens, the only one with narrow red trim on his trousers. Okay, so he must have had some sort of a red trim line on his pants or the lower part of his suit. Might have meant that he was in charge. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. So this individual with the narrow red trim on his trousers presented Simonton with three of the pancakes, hot from the griddle. As he did so, the alien touched his own forehead, apparently a salute in thanks to Simonton for his help. Not unlike what maybe a lot of people on Earth would do. Simonton saluted back. Each of the pancakes was roughly 3 inches in diameter and perforated with small holes. I'm going to show a picture of him with that pancake. Okay, so that's the pancake there. On the picture on the right, he's holding it. Doesn't look like much, but you can tell that it's been on a griddle because it's slightly burned towards where his finger is holding it. Okay, so the head alien, I guess that's the guy with the red stripe on his trousers. The head alien then connected a line or belt to a hook in his clothing, and the hatch closed. Okay, I'm going to read that again because that's also unusual. The head alien connected a line or belt to a hook in his clothing, and the hatch closed. That sounds like a very manual way of closing the hatch, not very high-tech at all. The saucer rose about 20 feet and took off to the south at a 45-degree angle. Okay, so that's been reported before. UFOs going off at a 45-degree angle. That's usually the way that they take off. Its wake left a blast of air that tossed the tops of nearby pine trees. The craft took only 2 seconds to disappear from view. 2 seconds? That's almost instantaneously. Simonton ate one of the pancakes, ostensibly in the interest of science, and he's quoted as saying, "It tasted like cardboard," end quote. He told the Associated Press. The two other pancakes he gave to Vilas County Judge Frank Carter, a local UFO enthusiast. Carter, who called the aliens saucernauts, said he believed Simonton's story since he could not think of any way in which the farmer might profit from the hoax. That's true. Yeah, Simonton never profited from the story and it never deviated from the story either to the end of his life. Carter's son, Colin, today a lawyer in Eagle River, said, quote, I recall as a youngster that my dad took it very seriously. Okay, so the Judge Carter took it very seriously. So Judge Carter sent the pancakes to what was then the country's top investigative group, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, or NICAP. How about that? They refused the opportunity to check it out. Now, why would they do that? That's unusual. That put a damper on Judge Carter's plans. He had wanted to hold a seminar on the incident. By this time, Simonton said he was, quote, irked by reporters making fun of the situation and laughing. In response to all this, the Air Force dispatched its civilian UFO investigator, the famous J. Allen Hynek. And Hynek at the time was an astronomer at Northwestern University. He later became convinced that UFOs are real and founded his own investigative agency, which took over NICAP. It took over NICAP's files after that group folded. Thanks to Hynek, a Northwestern University committee and the Air Force's Technical Intelligence Center analyzed one of Simonton's pancakes, thank goodness, and found it to be made of flour, sugar, and grease. It was rumored, however, that the wheat in the pancakes was of an unknown type. Okay, so about the only unknown ingredient was the wheat. The official Air Force assessment of it all, this case is unexplained. Quote, the only serious flaw in the story is the disappearance of the craft in 2 seconds. Okay, so they took it pretty seriously. Simonton answered questions directly, did not contradict himself. He insisted on the facts being exactly as he stated and refused to accept embellishments or modifications, he's quoted as saying. He stated he was sure that we wouldn't believe him, but that he didn't care whether he was believed. He stated simply that this happened and that was that. The private Air Force response was unearthed after a little detective work. It comes from a UFO handbook to Air Force personnel written by Lloyd Malin and issued in a popular edition by Science and Mechanics Publishing. In the book, Malin refers to, quote, JS, being Joe Simonton, a highly regarded, much respected citizen of Eagle River, Wisconsin, a small rural community noted for its attractiveness to tourists, end quote. One Air Force investigator, according to Malin, said that Simonton, quote, appeared quite sincere to me, did not appear to be the perpetrator of a hoax, end quote. But an Air Force Aeronautical Systems Division psychiatrist believed that Simonton had suffered a hallucination and subsequent delusion. The Air Technical Intelligence Center investigators said, quote, cases of this type could be injurious to the mental health of the individual if he became upset due to the experience. It was pointed out that experiences of this type, hallucinations followed by delusion, are not at all uncommon, and especially in rural communities, end quote. Okay, so the psychiatrist didn't believe him at all. Additionally, according to Malin, the Air Force took to heart an unsubstantiated rumor circulated by, among others, Raymond Palmer, a publisher of pulp flying saucer and science fiction magazines. Palmer reported to the Air Force his belief that Simonton had been hypnotized, oh geez, by an Eagle River real estate broker and was fed the pancake story so that he would repeat it and appear truthful. That certainly muddied the waters for poor Simonton. The motivation for this was economic. As always, it always comes down to money. For the purpose of a, quote, miniature Disneyland that is or was being built in the area. Geez, poor Joe. His story got all muddied because of greed. To understand how incredible the rumor was, it is useful to look at the credibility of Palmer himself. One of his favorite theories was that flying saucers came from a secret hollow Earth civilization ruled by a race called detrimental robots, which he abbreviated as DEROS. According to Palmer, the DEROS manipulated humanity with their projected thought rays. Okay, I was on board when he said inner Earth, but robots controlling humans, not sure about. Palmer's primary source, actually his only source, was a Pennsylvania welder who drew upon, quote, racial memory for his accounts. Not sure what that means. Okay, so there apparently is no mention in Air Force files of the possibility that the DEROS thought ray had been turned upon real estate agents or Palmer or even the Air Force, though I believe there is as much evidence for that as for an Eagle River Disneyland. Yeah, they certainly muddied Joe Simonton's credibility by putting that rumor out. But based on such sound evidence, quote, the Air Technical Intelligence Center, which headquartered Air Force UFO investigations, let the matter drop. Publicly, it was a mystery. The classified reason revealed to Milan was that the Air Force would not pursue the matter, quote, due to the possibility of causing Simonton embarrassment, which might prove injurious to his health. Okay, so they dropped it because they thought that Joe Simonton's health might be affected. I think he was only in his mid to early 60s. I think it was just an excuse to drop the whole matter and not pursue it. Yeah, I mean, they never debunked it, but they certainly didn't want to pursue it. And they put out a cover story through their psychiatrist that poor Simonton was delusional. But as for Simonton himself, in the end, he was left with a bitter taste in his mouth. And it wasn't from the pancakes. This article says, quote, that the next time he saw a flying saucer, he would keep it to himself. And then says here that in 1970, Simonton was visited by Lee Alexander, a UFO enthusiast active in a Detroit-based investigative group. Simonton told Alexander that he had more visits from the aliens, but that he had not told anyone because of the way the first report had been received. And that's, I guess, all that they reported back then. And that's too bad that he was treated that way, because his report was never debunked. It is bizarre, but they never debunked it. I'm going to go on to show a video of Joe Simonton himself. So you guys hang on there. You're going to actually see Joe Simonton telling the story himself in just a moment. Okay, so this was taken from a TV show called Saucers and Believers back in 1965. And you're going to hear the story right from Joe Simonton's mouth.
Where do you meet someone from outer space? Perhaps in the North Woods. Joe Simonton of Eagle River, Wisconsin, spins a yarn about an April morning in 1961. A morning when he says he came face to face with another world.
Right here is where this flying saucer, this UFO landed. Right here about where I'm standing. And it was a big, huge thing, and I wondered what the heck it was. I was in my kitchen having a bite of lunch, and I turned around, put the dishes in the sink, and I looked out the window, and that's when I first saw this thing coming straight down, just like an elevator. And first I thought the roof went off of my house, and I thought, no, the roof is green, and this is bright. What the heck is it? So I rushed out to see what it was, and by that time there was a hatchway opening up in the top of it, just like the trunk of your car. And then there stood a little man, I say a little man, about 5 foot tall, holding up a jug or a container, and he motioned he wanted to drink. He motioned for water. So I walked up to him to get this jug, and I looked at his eyes, and they were so penetrating that I had to look away. So I went to the basement to get this water, and I thought, well, they want water, so I'll take it up to them and see what happens. And with that, I brought the water up, and he was looking at me when I first came out of the basement. But I didn't look at his face until I got right up to him. Then I looked up, and I handed the jug up with both hands, and I had that same look in his eyes, a sort of a penetrating look. And when he took the water, I balanced myself with this hand against the machine, and I stepped back a few steps. And then with that, he set the jug down, and he gave me a salute with the back of his hand, a gesture of thanks, I presume. And then, well, I gave him my salute. What am I going to do? So I noticed this little man, same size of a man, right to the right side of the hatchway, cooking these pancakes, which I have one here yet. He was frying these pancakes, and I pointed to him and made a gesture like eating. I thought maybe I'd get a conversation out of him. Nobody was saying anything. But he didn't say a word. He just reached over and he got a handful of them, 4 of them, and he handed them down to me. And they were hot and greasy. And this man cooking these pancakes, it was on a square grill-like concern. I couldn't see any flame, but it seemed to be very hot. There was smoke coming from it. And if that was their food, God help them, because I took a bite of one of them, and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. And if that's what they lived on, no wonder they're small. And with that, he reached up and he closed this hatch with a heavy thud, click like when it latched. And you couldn't a bit more see where that hatch was, and you could see a hole in my hand. And with that, the thing started to raise, just like it came down. Everything was timed perfect. It went up about 20 feet. It tilted a 45-degree straight south and shot off. And within 2 or 3 seconds, it was out of sight. Well, there I stood in the driveway with a handful of greasy pancakes, my mouth open, wondering what the heck I'd saw, what had happened.
It is outside the realm of the Air Force to pass judgment on Mr. Simonton's case. However, the pancakes that he turned over to the Air Force were turned over to the Food and Drug people, and they were analyzed as pure buckwheat pancakes.
So as you can see, Joe Simonton is a very believable person, no theatrics whatsoever. And as I said before, he never profited from his story, he never deviated from his story. But I thought this was worth showing because it's so rare to have an encounter of the third kind where somebody actually makes contact with a non-human entity. And it was rare also because, remember, Joe Simonton said he touched the craft and no radiation burns, no side effects from having been close to the craft. Has been reported many times before in other UFO encounters. He was actually able to communicate with this extraterrestrial, whether it was pantomime or telepathic. He understood that they needed water, and he exchanged water for some pancakes, which I think is the first time that it's ever been reported that a human being in an NHI has had a trade or an exchange like that. Cooking in the craft was also unusual. It's never been reported that non-human entities are cooking, especially on a griddle inside of their craft. The fact that the hatch was seamless when it closed, you couldn't see it, has been reported before. The craft tilting before taking off, that was reported many times afterward also. So those descriptions are consistent. The judge, Judge Carter, in his town there, He's about the only one that really took him seriously. He's the person that Joe Simonton gave one of the pancakes to. And Judge Carter went all the way, believed so much that he sent the pancake off to be investigated by a investigative group called NICAP, N-I-C-A-P, which decided not to pursue the matter for some reason or other. And it wasn't until Blue Book came about that Professor J. Allen Hynek came to investigate, and he took the steps of investigating these pancakes. And that's when they found out that the pancakes were made out of flour, sugar, grease, but some sort of unknown wheat, possibly from some other planet. And it's been said in other shows like Ancient Aliens that wheat contained no sodium, no salt whatsoever, which is very unusual worldwide on this planet. Lloyd Mallon, one of the Air Force investigators, said that Joe Simonton was a respected citizen in his town. But a psychiatrist in the Air Technical Investigative Committee said that the psychiatrist said that Joe Simonton was probably hallucinating and prone to delusions because, in his own words, he said that people in rural communities were prone to delusions and hallucinations. That's he got away with saying that back then in 1961. Palmer, the local ufologist or UFO enthusiast, sort of muddied the waters by saying that somehow Joe Simonton must have been hypnotized by a local real estate agent who had ulterior motives of opening up some sort of a Disney-like theme park in Eagle River, Wisconsin, and attracting tourists that way. The Air Force eventually ended the investigation of Joe Simonton's case, saying that they wanted to avoid Joe Simonton's any further embarrassment or any issues with his health. Now, why would he be embarrassed? He was already telling the story publicly and on TV. But remember, this was during a time where the Air Force was dismissing a lot of pilots' reports of UFOs and bogies. They would routinely dismiss pilots' reports of bogies and UFOs and would label pilots as delusional, and they would ruin their careers as a result of reporting these sightings. It wasn't until recently that Ryan Graves was effective in having some laws passed to protect pilots when they report UFOs or UAPs. In the end, Joe Simonton was left with a bitter taste. He was actually sorry that he ever came out with his story. And in 1970, he was visited by a UFO enthusiast by the name of Lee Alexander. And he confided in him and actually said that he had been visited again by these aliens a few times. So overall, a very intriguing story and a testament to how credible witnesses have been treated throughout history. This was back in 1961. And unfortunately, Joe Simonton got a raw deal. He didn't profit from this at all. If anything, his reputation was besmirched. I'm Al Barrows. This is UFO Disclosure. I hope you enjoyed that. And keep searching for the truth. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Let's manifest a protective shield over children in war-torn countries like Gaza and the Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Remember, my website is ufo-disclosure.com. My Instagram is UFO Disclosure Podcast. My Twitter is UFO Disclosure with an underscore at the end. And my YouTube channel is at UFO Disclosure, B as in Bravo, R as in Romeo, 3YY. Thank you. Thank you all for listening to my podcast.